Okay, so this is a bit of a test to try out some off-the-cuff data visualization idea and see how far we get with it. So right now is the Masters, which is a golf tournament that's going on right now this weekend. And I was wondering if we could maybe make some sort of data visualization using some of the data from the Masters. And particularly, I was interested in kind of looking at how a hole was presented. So we can see if we look at an individual player, they have a scorecard of how they're doing on every hole. So there's the par for the hole, so how many strokes that player is expected to get the ball in the hole in, and then their actual score. And then the scorecard has some symbols for whether it's below par or above par, with below being better, making it in fewer strokes. So we have these circles, meaning that it did it one under par, or double circles like two under par, things like that. And then they do a bunch of rounds. So like in the first round here, we can see that on the first hole, Justin Rose here did it in 3 shots. And there's a lot of there's a combination of data visualizations that are both very very condensed and also very elaborate. So they have in one way the visualization of how someone did on a hole is right here with their scorecard of that they have some sort of number designating how well they did at that hole, and then also with I'm not sure the complete collaboration there. I think it's through IBM or some other partners. They have like full scans of the entire course that you can see in space the arc made by the every single shot. And I think MKBHD did a great piece about some of the tech behind this that might be sort of related to this of how they're calculating this. But so it gets quite elaborate quite quickly of being able to see every single shot and what's going on. But one thing is you can't see too much sort of how well the one player did in terms of getting the ball in the hole. So I was interested in maybe making the idea was a bar graph or some sort of bar chart that was showing the progression of one person's um, one person's progression through a hole. So for this first hole, it would be that it would be the distance that they were to the pin, so to the hole, and there would be a separate row for every single stroke made. So let me see if I can pull up. Just make kind of a blanker space here. If I pull up this, I can check whether I'm still screen sharing here. I might not be anymore. It's attempting to screen share. Aha. Does that work? Oh, I might have to recapture the window in my thing here. Okay, so the idea was that I would make some sort of chart where on the y-axis this would be the like strokes. So like the first stroke, second stroke. I think in the whole one that Justin Rose was doing. This is like the whole. Then this x would be the distance to the pin. So, and we'd have some sort of staggered bars. So you could have something like this, and you could maybe have some itemized items of like yards of how far each of the hits were. Oh, screen share is no longer active. Why is that? Let's try again. It was there for a second. Oh, did I might have stopped sharing. Present with screen share. Connect to app. I had it for a second. Yeah, so that's working. It just doesn't seem to maybe stay, or I maybe push something accidentally. We'll see. But then the second stroke would be like a little bit less. Third stroke is even fewer, and then they actually like get it in the hole. And that would be the idea there. Just wondering like how that might look. So need to get some data for that. So we can hide this at the moment. So if we look back at how Justin Rose did, what we see is there's a breakdown of like the yardage that a given hole is. So this hole is listed to be 445 yards of a par 4. If you look at this breakdown here, like on a shot-by-shot basis, the scan is a little bit more exact. So they seem to round things. So so like in actuality, it's 420. I think 428 is what that is. So that's being rounded up to 445. If we look like at another hole, that's 575. And once this finishes, he has to hit it, and then it'll display right there the 270 to 311. So that's 581, where it was sort of displayed as being 575. So I think there's some rounding there. And also I think it varies because from round to round, where the hole is placed on the green changes. So that might affect the scan numbers here versus the sort of declared number of how far the hole is. But either way, like for a given hole, should be able to get these shot values and then compare it to always to the pin, I think is the number I want. So I want the entire, how would we want to do this? So what I wanted to display, which was from the visualization standpoint, was the amount they made for each shot. So there might be some kind of uncertainty on the end of the x-axis being the exact value, like a certain amount from the pin. So I think what I want to do is I'll use the first shot just like writing down of like the total distance and then how much each shot is, and then you just can see what happens there. So I have a Google sheet here that I can just, I can pull that into this page here for a second. So if we have something like, if we're doing tidy data, then we would have for a player, for let's bold this. We can, where's data? You can usually freeze this row. So for a given hole and for a given player and for a stroke, we want the after one stroke, the distance left to the hole. So this would be like player shots. And then we'd probably also need another thing, or we could just add it here since it's just a small test of the overall distance to a hole for a given hole on the course. Maybe that will vary. So we could have This is player. We could also have a round, so it's quite nested. Um, for a given round and a hole and a stroke, there's some amount of distance from the pin. And yeah, so let's see, what would that look like? If we look at hole one, round one, so we'll just call this. We can write it all out. Justin Rose for round one, hole one, stroke one. We would want, so the first shot he hit goes 281 yards, and now he's 141 yards to the pin, to the hole. So I think could probably just record both is probably an easy way to do it. So we could have like a combined distance metric and a distance to the pin, or also just a y1, y2, because what I was doing in that visualization was having where you're starting, so like how far you've gone maybe in y1 or x1, I guess, and then how far you made it in that first stroke. So I think those are the data points we probably want. So in stroke one, we went from start to end. Yeah. There's not, somehow we maybe could record how far we are from the hole, but maybe we don't care because they're going to get it in eventually. So this shot one, we go from 0 to 281. And then once we do the next shot, we go wham, okay. And the next shot is 154 yards. And then he was 24 feet away. Is this just going to be a pain? You could add these together. So plus 281 plus whatever the value is. So if we have the entire hole that is, what is it listed as? 445 yards, then we can go that first stroke. Was idea of having a bar going from 0 to whatever it was, 281. And then the next bar would go from 281 to adding 154. And I guess we would just potentially need to have a boundary of how high, how big the hole is. We could add that in. That's kind of repetitive though. We'll see what happens. So if you do 154 yards from where he was, that's 281 plus 184 yards. And he's 24 feet from the hole. And then what's the next hit do? That final hit, how's it described? He did 24 feet for a result of birdie. Okay. So 24 feet in terms of some fraction of a yard. So this would actually be 281 to 465. Yes, that would be this would go here, and then 465 to in the hole, which is 24 feet. 24 feet in yards is 8 yards. So plus 8 equals this plus 8, 473. And that was the same thing that it was before. If you look back at shot 1, it was always 473, or are we getting some error there? There it is. Yeah. So there's a bit of calculation going there of like as the crow flies. So maybe that's not what I want to show. Because what I was thinking, like in this of like those nested bars, you could have nested bars or staggered bars, and then you could have, but that would only show kind of the distance of each stroke. You could just do the distance to the pin of like it's 147 yards after the first stroke. It's some number of yards distance to the next stroke. Could just do that. We could record both of that. So the start goes from 0 to end, and then we'll say the pin distance was something, 147 yards. So it's always in yards. The distance here is, I don't think there's a faster way here. I'm waiting for that. Yeah, that value. This goes, so the pin is only 24 feet, so that's 8 yards. So that was this, and then this plus 8, and that's 0. So there's some difference here where this states to be 147, and then we're getting 184 as a difference. So that's a little odd. But stroke 2, stroke 3 would be like that. And that kind of works. You could have another thing for like the par, whether the par for this was 4. I guess that's just going to be repeated. There's some cleaner ways to do this. Well, if we took this data and we tried exporting it, see, golf test. Should be able to actually just drag it. Okay. We could, I think, do typed be true here and just go for that as defining things for us. If we take that. Like a simple thing you could do is just that's then stroke on the y-axis, and on the x-axis could be pin. Y1 and Y2. So if we did something like that, we could do plot.bar in the x direction, I think, of golf, where the x, yeah, can we do x1 and x2, where x1 is start, y1, or x2 is end, and y is stroke. Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking. If you could see the progression of like the really long drives that they make. So it's like the visual, I guess, that they're showing of the entire hole over time, but I guess a simplified way. And then another thing you could do at this point is you could instead show the endpoints of all of the players, and that could kind of give you a good sense of like at a given stroke where people are. Like not everyone, is going to drive to 281 yards. It's going to be something else. But if you show these full bars, then you're really accentuating how far someone went instead of like comparing across different players. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing was whether you could somehow signal with this whether this was a bogey or a birdie or something else like that. So how could we do that? That was regarding par, of whether the stroke was above par or not. So you could select the last bar maybe and color it that way. Um, you could color them all like being negative or positive, like being green if it's a gold or not. But anywho, that pretty much works. Uh, that was my main idea. If we clean this up a little bit, so let's do for the Y scale, let's have the label be stroke, and let's have the X scale, the label be distance in yards. And we could do a grid on the X maybe. And we could say, we could grab the last value, check whether it is below or above par, and color them according to that. So in this case, the last stroke was stroke 3. When he got it in the hole, the pin was 0. It's less than par, which means good thing. So it's maybe green or could be orange or something. So how can we do that? Well, we could just simply color fill. In this case, would be something like forest green because he got it in got it under par. If it was equal, then maybe it could be gray, or if it was over par, it could be worse. Could check what sort of color. I mean, it's red. If If you look at the scoring for the Masters, what do they use? I think black is bad and red is good in the finished scorecard. Yeah, so red is actually good. Under par, red is a good thing. If you look at the classic leaderboard scorecard, and green is bad. And then maybe gray could be negative. Well, anywho, I guess there's a little more formatting that this could be, but I feel like you could extend this to other players as well as to someone's round. The really long hits and then down to the really short hits. So you would also be able to see if they missed and got a bogey, maybe like just barely missed. That would show up as these barely hit in ones. I'm not sure if Justin has a case of that, so maybe on 18, just barely missed on stroke 4. Yeah, so there's a pretty long putt here that he doesn't make in the shot. So he does a shot 5. Oh, shot 5, 2 feet. I guess they call that 2 feet. Whereas shot 4, this is showing 3. Yeah, shot 4. Okay, that's more than 2 feet. I wonder what that's designating. Because shot 3, wham, it's quite a distance. What do they say this is at the end of their calculation? Oh, it didn't say anything. There we go. Okay, so the shot, then it's 16 feet out. So then if we look at the last shot, 3 to 4, is this going to do something? No. You can only go backwards, I guess. It's just not showing the 4th shot there, which is a little strange. Oh well. Shot 4 you could calculate, I guess, is like 16 feet there. But in that case, so you'd have this small sliver at the end of you'd just have 2 feet. There's the one value where you missed. Maybe that's a little too busy for a given golfer, but you could show like all 18 of like all these values over time. Anywho, I thought that was kind of interesting. Could flesh it out for the other holes. Like, so Justin did these other holes, all 18. Then you could find out all the pars. How could we create a color scale? If we have color scale, that you pass in a value, two values, I guess. If it's, you'd pass the par value and you would pass the stroke value. So color, and then if we pass the stroke and par, if the stroke equals par, then we can return, we'll say gray. Else if the stroke is greater than par, return forest green. Else return fire brick. And we couldn't find the last value, so you could say this is for golf, and you could say you could filter the data, so it could be hole is golf. If we had multiple values, you could dot filter where d dot hole is whatever you want it to be. And you could grab the very last value. Say we assume that these are sorted. You could slice the last stroke. If the last stroke value is below par, then color it. So you could say, first use the whole data here, and you could say, can you do a plot.select last? I'm not sure about that. Yeah. So that's red because we're under par, which is considered a good thing in golf. So maybe that's confusing, that red is usually bad in most visualizations, but it's good as in a scorecard for golf. So we could switch that around. We'll say forest green is good, and fire brick is bad. So here, this was hole 1, and Justin got a birdie in this case. If he did like hole 4, then he got par in that case. So I think what I would probably want to do is This is kind of cool for one individual hole and maybe like seeing one person's hole over their shots over time. I would probably change these to be dots, which is going to break everything because we don't have an x1 and x2. We could just have an x. Oh, because it's, yeah, so I want it to still be that. You want to be displaying start. We're going 0 or the pin, but you would just display the end, and you would need to have a x scale value that stops it, that has it go from 0 to the scale. So to get the extent, but you could do that if you had multiple players. So then if you had like 5 players, you could see their scattered values on the first shot of hole 1, like how far they went, which could be interesting. So I think probably just consolidate this for now. And this hole, I could just pull this in to the actual chart. And is that how you do it? Nope. I forget how you format. You can format your code. Shift Option F. Shift Option F. Oh, but we're still wrong because hole is not. Oh, that's why it's not doing it. There we go. Like that. You could just define that where you need it. Cool. And then that is one of the golf holes for Justin. So this is test plot of the golf of the distances of each stroke for a given player on a given hole. So if we did this again for the next hole, let's just try this. We could add, I would update his name just to be exactly what we want it to be for ease of use. And we could add a title here. So we could say title. It could be from the hole. It could be hole.player. So this is going to be, oh, so yes. So last stroke, we could define that externally as well. And use last stroke to look it up. Last stroke.player is Justin Rose. And then the subtitle would be which hole it is. How do they format? They say hole Doesn't it show that? Or maybe it doesn't. Hole 4. So you could say hole 4, hole last stroke dot hole par last stroke dot par. Okay. Is hole 1 par 4. And then we could color that based on the distance made. That's pretty nice. I would put maybe the distance potentially on the top. Axis. Like that. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Like that, or you want to see, because there you're kind of accentuating the distance here compared to the distance at the bottom. Could also do some tooltip work to be able to highlight and say which values they are. But that's a pretty good initial setup. Okay. So if we added another, his next hole for round 1 was this. It's a 575 or so. And this first hit is 270 yards. The pin is 311. So if we add this out, this is round 1, hole 2, stroke 1. It was 270 yards, or 0 to 270. The pin is 311 away. I don't think we're actually currently using this, but we can keep track of it. And then the par was a 5. Okay. His next shot went to come on, 289 and 59. He went from 270 to 289. Yeah. Which equals this plus 289. And he was 59 yards out on the par 5. And same thing here for stroke 3. Dink! Got really close there. He did 60 yards, which he's 5 feet out. 559, or could just equal it, but 559 equals plus 60. And he was 5 yards out, 5 feet out, which is 5 divided by 3. That many yards out from the pin on a par 5. And par 4, he did the 5 feet. We'll just say it as that. So, 4th stroke, he went from this. You gotta, yeah, okay. This equals this plus the 5 feet. No, not the 5 feet. This. And the pin is 0 on par 5. So if we export this again to same thing, this might break because I'm not doing some filtering correctly. This is assuming that it's player 1. We filter down. So I guess we could write this, abstract this out as a function that you only pass the data for a given hole for a given player. But if we do that, we could just write this as a function. But let's just copy paste it for now. If we do the same thing but hole 2, then there's his par 5 in 4. I kind of like it. It could actually be in reverse of like 1, 2, 3, 4. What if we swap that? No. Yeah. Okay. So you could kind of see that. You could do some faceting, which I'd have to confirm how to do that correctly, but you could split this up and do an entire plot of his entire round. But you can see the big shots, like, so this was driving 280 yards, this was driving whatever it was. We could find the difference between those to get the value and then display it. Yeah. Well, that's pretty interesting. I think what I would want to do is probably collect the data for a given round, one for a player and maybe like 3 or 4 players, because then that way you could, for one thing, you'd be able to do this multiple times, so you could see multiple holes over time. And you'd also be able to potentially compare players, so you could see like Justin did his first shot to about 280 yards, and you could also compare all the shots across all players. And that could be interesting to see. But in terms of just like going from nothing and just like making up the data from that chart or that site, that's a pretty good start. I think what I would do, what I kind of wanted to see is like simplify this. So like this, this is showing the entire visual of what's happening. And I kind of want to just convey this down, which was just the distance to the pin of like we're getting over to the, we're trying to cross that gap, go from left to right. And so you're able to visually see the number of strokes. You're also able to see the size of each shot. And didn't do this or didn't get to one of these, but I think you could show, in this case, his 18th hole. You could show the example of the like 1-2 notches that where he ran into trouble and like missed the last shot. But cool. All right, I think I'll kind of leave it there. But going forward, I think I would definitely maybe collect some more data and come back to this to flesh this out further. All right.